Michelle shook her head in denial. No, Adam, I can't stay at Jessica's house. Adam held her hand and explained lovingly. Look, Michelle, this is our home too. Jessica also thought you should come with us. But I was the one who refused, thinking why should you be dragged around with us? You'll be comfortable here. Think of this as your home too. Michelle was still hesitating, but Adam cut her off. No ifs, ands, or buts. You know the house is empty, and Jessica insisted you stay here with Frank. We were supposed to leave in the morning, but I was worried about leaving you home alone. Michelle took a long breath. Okay. Adam smiled and said, That's better. Jessica thought this was appropriate too. So just relax and make yourself at home. I'll call you by evening. Michelle nodded half-heartedly and watched Adam and Jessica's car drive away. Jessica had sent a short text to Frank stating that Michelle, her sister-in-law, was at his house because Frank was unaware of Michelle's arrival until now. However, Frank was so busy in a business meeting that he hadn't seen the text. Michelle remained seated in the lounge, but the massive empty house was making her anxious. The silence was deafening, making her restless. She started to slowly explore the house, walking step by step. She unknowingly went down the basement stairs. As soon as she stepped inside, it felt like an underground storage cellar. A strange smell and darkness surrounded her. She was about to leave in panic when she heard the faint sound of someone crying. Curiosity took hold of her, and with trembling steps she moved towards the sound. What she saw made her freeze. Inside, there were jail-like cells, and in the first cell, a man was groaning in pain. He looked like a prisoner. A scream escaped her throat out of fear, and she retreated quickly. She turned to leave, but her feet froze. At the door stood Frank Elm with his manager, his eyes red with rage. Dangerous dogs were with him. Michelle felt like her soul was leaving her body. She tried to speak, but her voice was stuck in her throat. Who are you? Frank Elm's thunderous voice echoed. What are you doing here? Michelle was so terrified that tears began to flow from her eyes, and she started backing away while shaking her head. Her wide eyes were focused on the dogs. Who are you? Frank Elm roared again in anger. If you don't answer, I won't even give you a moment to breathe. Michelle backed up until she hit the wall and tried to say something. But words had deserted her. Frank Elm looked at her with cold eyes and released the dogs' leashes. The dogs ran rapidly towards Michelle, but before they could attack, she lost consciousness and fell to the ground. The very next moment, at Frank Elm's command, the dogs stopped. Michelle groaned as she opened her eyes. Her head was throbbing with pain as if someone had struck it with a heavy stone. The room was semi-dark and she was confused. Holding her head, she composed herself and sat up. Suddenly, the entire scene before she fainted flashed before her eyes. She trembled with fear. She tried to get off the bed quickly, but before her feet could touch the floor, a cold voice echoed from the couch. Stay on the bed, Michelle. Hearing this voice, Michelle squeezed her eyes shut in fear. Her heart began to pound heavily in her chest. When she opened her eyes again, Frank Elm was standing in front of her. He was looking at her intensely, and Michelle's flinching and nervousness were clearly visible to him. I am Jessica's brother, Frank said in a calm tone. When I was asking repeatedly, who are you? Did you lose your ability to speak? Why didn't you tell me you were Jessica's sister-in-law? If you hadn't fainted, my dogs would have torn you apart in an instant. His tone was casual, but Michelle felt a cruelty and ruthlessness in it. Michelle lowered her gaze in silence. She couldn't give any answer. Frank turned to leave the room, then stopped and spoke again in the same cold tone. Guests are expected to have manners. They stay within their limits. They don't peek into the private areas of the house. Saying this, Frank walked out of the room. Michelle took a deep breath and held her head. Her gaze fell on her luggage lying some distance from the bed. She quickly picked up her phone and, crying, called her brother. As soon as the call was picked up, Michelle cried, Adam! I don't want to stay here! Please take me away from here! But from the other side came Jessica's voice. Michelle, what happened? Adam is in a meeting. I have his phone. Why are you crying? Jessica, I don't want to stay here. Everything here is very scary. Tell Adam to send me home. I'll stay alone. Michelle spoke between hiccups. Jessica's tone was now a bit harsh. Look, Michelle. This all happened due to a misunderstanding. You shouldn't have gone downstairs just like that. Perhaps you don't know, but that is Frank's private space. But Jessica, how was I to know what was there? I just went down casually. Michelle offered her defense. I know, Michelle, but you should have been careful too. Frank has strict rules. What you saw was not meant for you, Jessica explained to her. Michelle cried. But he was releasing the dogs on me. I was very scared, Jessica. I don't want to stay here for even a moment. Look, Michelle, what's done is done. Now just stay comfortably in the room upstairs. Don't touch anything. Let Adam come back, then we will talk. Right now you just rest, okay? Jessica tried to console her and added, Listen, don't talk to anyone about this. Especially Adam, he will just get worried for no reason. Michelle barely held back her tears and said again in a suppressed voice, Okay, Jessica. Jessica hung up the phone and Michelle took a deep breath. She was extremely worried and terrified. She couldn't understand how to get out of this situation. The night had deepened. Michelle was sitting lost in her room when there was a knock on the door. Madam, dinner is served. Sir is calling you to the dining room. The housekeeper's soft voice was heard. Michelle replied immediately, Please bring my food here to the room. I don't want to come down. I am sorry, madame. This is against the house rules. Sir says everyone must eat in the dining room, the housekeeper insisted. Michelle was feeling the hunger intensely. She hadn't eaten anything all day. Out of compulsion, she got up and slowly walked down the stairs towards the dining room. As soon as she stepped into the dining room, seeing Frank Elm sitting at the head of the table, her steps halted right there. Her heart clenched with fear once again. She was about to turn back when Frank's cold voice echoed, Michelle, where are you going? Sit. There was such authority in that voice that Michelle's feet froze. She slowly pulled out a chair and sat down. At Frank's signal, the housekeeper immediately started serving her food. Michelle had just taken one bite when Frank's serious voice was heard. You will not disturb Jessica or Adam by calling them again. Michelle, startled, looked at Frank with fearful eyes. She couldn't understand how Frank knew about her call. Jessica called. She was worried because of your childish complaints. Frank explained, sensing her surprise. Michelle tried to explain immediately. I was just worried, that's why. Frank cut her off. You don't need to be worried. As long as you are here, you will face no trouble. Provided you follow the house rules and I don't have to hear your childish whining again. Michelle lowered her head. She couldn't say anything more. Frank ate silently, and Michelle also quietly finished her food. Though the bites were hard to swallow, 2 days had passed. Michelle was fed up with being confined within the four walls of her room. Her eyes hurt from reading books constantly, and passing time on the phone now felt like a burden. When the housekeeper came to clean the room, Michelle hesitantly asked her, Excuse me, could you tell me where Mr. Frank is? The housekeeper replied, Madam, Sir has gone out of the city for 2 days for some urgent work. Hearing the news of Frank's departure, Michelle breathed a sigh of relief as if her soul had been freed from prison. She immediately stepped out of the room. As far as the eye could see, a lush green lawn spread out. She began to walk calmly on the lawn. Suddenly, heavy rain started. When the raindrops fell on her face, she felt a strange sense of freshness. She twirled with joy like a child and began to bathe in the rain. Walking, she reached the backyard of the house, where there was also a large swimming pool. Meanwhile, Frank Elm's flight had been cancelled due to the rain. He returned home filled with anger. Upon arriving, he asked the housekeeper for coffee and went to his room. In anger, he walked out to his room's balcony, which opened towards the back of the house, while dialing someone on the phone. His gaze suddenly fell on the swimming pool below. Michelle was splashing water happily like a child, bathing in the rain. Frank was stunned seeing her. For several moments, he just watched Michelle. A faint smile appeared on his face when suddenly Michelle's foot slipped, and she fell into the swimming pool with a splash. Michelle started thrashing her hands rapidly in the water. The colour drained from Frank's face. He realised that Michelle didn't know how to swim. He ran quickly out of the balcony and rushed towards the backyard. shouting. There, Michelle was struggling to save herself by thrashing her limbs, but then began to drown. Frank didn't waste a single moment and jumped into the swimming pool with lightning speed. He gathered Michelle in his arms and pulled her out. Michelle had lost consciousness by then. As soon as Frank pulled her out of the pool, he pressed her stomach to try and expel the water. Simultaneously, he ordered the housekeeper to call a doctor. Shortly after, the doctor arrived and, after examining Michelle, stated that she was out of danger. She had simply passed out due to swallowing too much water. After the doctor left, Frank began pacing the room in anger. He cast a furious look at the unconscious Michelle, and then, without saying another word, walked out of the room. When Michelle opened her eyes, she felt her head was heavy. There was a dull ache in her body too. She couldn't remember anything about how she got here or what had happened to her. She tried to force her mind, but everything remained blurry. With a strange anxiety and curiosity, she got out of bed and walked slowly downstairs to find the housekeeper. She intended to ask who saved her and what happened. As soon as she reached downstairs, voices coming from the drawing room attracted her attention. She hesitated and peeked inside, and her eyes widened in surprise. Frank Elm was there, deep in conversation with two strange men. He went to another city. The thought flashed in Michelle's mind. A wave of fear ran through her, and she immediately started climbing the stairs back up so no one would see her. "Michelle!" Frank's thunderous voice stopped her right there. She turned and looked. Frank cast a cold glance at the two men, who immediately got up and left. Michelle, terrified and with trembling steps, reached in front of Frank. "Do you remember anything? What happened?" Frank asked in a cold tone while looking at her. The redness of anger was clearly visible in his eyes. Michelle shook her head in fear. "No, I don't remember anything. I was just... Who are those people and why are you here?" Her voice was stuttering. "It should be of no concern to you who those people are and how I came here." Frank cut her off. "The only concern is that once again, you did not obey me. I told you in clear words not to step out of your room, not to go into private places. Do you think this is child's play?" His voice had become sharp. Michelle said fearfully, I didn't know. I was just in the rain. I got bored in the room," Frank said in a sarcastic tone. "And because of this boredom, you put your life in danger? You don't know how to swim. So what were you doing near the swimming pool? Do you have any idea how much trouble you've put me in?" He took a step forward, and Michelle took 2 steps back in fear. I didn't intend to. I really don't remember anything." "What happened? Who saved me?" Michelle asked in a frightened manner. "You don't even remember who saved you?" Frank cast a furious look at her. "That's because you lost consciousness, and all this happened due to your own carelessness. If something had happened to you, what answer would I give to Adam?" Displeasure was clearly evident in his voice. Michelle lowered her eyes in shame. She didn't know what had happened to her, but Frank's anger was telling her that she had made a big mistake. She didn't dare speak any further. When Frank's gaze fell on Michelle's teary eyes, his anger softened somewhat. The harshness in his tone was replaced by a slight gentleness. "If you were getting bored, you could have told me. I could have provided some activity for you." Michelle lifted her head in surprise to look at him. She couldn't understand if this was the same person who was scolding her just moments ago. "Come with me," Frank said, looking at her. Michelle refused immediately. "No, I am fine in my room." Frank stared at her once again. He was such an expert at staring that Michelle had to retract her words. There was a plea in her eyes. "But..." "No buts," Frank cut her off. "Come with me." His tone was still serious, but it lacked the previous harshness. Michelle helplessly lowered her head and began following him. The housekeeper standing at the corner of the door watched all this in amazement. She had never seen this side of Frank. He who always remained stern and furious was softening today over a girl's distress. Frank took Michelle to an expensive shopping mall. Her surprise knew no bounds when Frank took her into a magnificent boutique and told her to shop. She was just looking at the beauty of the boutique and its expensive items when Frank received an urgent phone call and went outside, leaving her alone. Michelle considered this moment a blessing. She remembered how she had left the room, and then what happened swirled in her mind. She decided in her heart that she would absolutely not leave the room until Adam arrived. The salesgirl kept bringing beautiful but extremely expensive dresses in front of her one after another. Michelle just kept shaking her head in refusal. After a while, Frank returned and asked her, "What did you buy?" Michelle shook her head. "Reason?" Frank asked. "I don't need anything," Michelle replied in a soft voice. Frank stared at her seriously. There was a slight displeasure in his eyes. "You wear very nice clothes." "Don't you? The housekeeper in my home wears better clothes than the ones you have." There was bitterness in his tone. But this bitterness was not reflecting his anger, but something else. Saying this, Frank picked up 2 or 3 beautiful suits himself. "Look at these. These will look very good on you." There was a plea in Michelle's voice. "These are all very expensive. I don't have that much money." "I will buy them when Adam comes." Frank ignored her words. He chose some clothes of his own will, paid for them, and then took Michelle to a shoe shop. There too, he selected 2 pairs of expensive shoes and bought them for her. Michelle looked at Frank on the verge of crying. She couldn't understand why Frank was imposing his decisions on her, why he was buying her all these expensive things against her will. After shopping, Frank took her to an expensive hotel. The more normal Frank acted, the more fear Michelle felt. She was afraid there might be some other reason behind this behavior. Frank asked her about food, but Michelle refused, saying, "I'm not hungry." Her repeated refusals were making Frank angry, but he controlled himself and ordered food of his own choice. They were just about to start eating when 2 spoiled rich brats sitting at the table in front of them started passing inappropriate remarks at Michelle. "Hey, bro, what a catch! Just look at her figure," one said. The other replied, laughing, "Yeah, man, looks like she came with the hero. If she gives us a chance, I swear." Michelle lowered her eyes in shame and fear. Frank's face began to turn red with rage. Blood rushed to his eyes. He clenched his fist and prepared to get up, but Michelle immediately held his hand in fear and stopped him by shaking her head. Seeing Michelle so terrified, Frank loosened his fist and, without saying anything more, got up from there. Michelle also quickly rushed behind him. Frank was driving the car back home in silence. Since the incident at the hotel, he hadn't said a single word. This silence was making Michelle even more terrified. All sorts of doubts were crossing her mind about what Frank would do now. Reaching home, Frank dropped her at the porch and, without saying anything, turned the car around and drove out. Michelle came into her room holding the shopping bags. She placed the bags on the sofa and sat on the bed, taking a deep breath. At that very moment, Adam's call came on her phone. She answered immediately. "What's the matter coming back from shopping?" Adam teased. Michelle, startled, said, "Who told you?" "Jessica told me that Frank took you shopping." "I'm very happy that you are not getting bored there," Adam said, smiling. Sadness spread over Michelle's face. "Adam, when will you come back?" There was a strange despair in her voice. Adam got worried. "Is there a problem, Michelle? Everything is fine, right?" Michelle denied it immediately. "No, there is no problem. I just miss you." "Oh, don't worry," Adam consoled her. "Just a little work is left. God willing, we will return very soon. You take care of yourself and stay nicely with Frank." Michelle sighed and hung up the phone. Her heart was somewhat satisfied by Adam's words, but Frank's mysterious behavior and those horrific experiences were not letting her have any peace. Michelle was pacing restlessly in the room. She was feeling intensely suffocated even inside the 4 walls, as if there was no passage for air. She held her head. Staying in the room for even one more moment became impossible for her. She immediately went out of the room and asked the housekeeper coming from the front, "Where is Frank?" The housekeeper replied, "Madam, sir hasn't returned home yet." Michelle paused for a moment, then asked, "When will he return?" "Possibly by night." The housekeeper gave a casual answer. Hearing the news of Frank not being home, Michelle took a deep breath. The burden on her shoulders had lightened. She walked slowly and sat in the outer lounge. Her eyes involuntarily stopped at the path from where she had gone to the basement the first time. She had been stopping herself from going there for days. But today, Frank's absence reawakened the curiosity in her heart once again. "I'll be back in just 5 minutes," she said to herself and slowly started moving towards the basement stairs. But today she couldn't see the place where she had gone the first time. It seemed as if no such place existed here. She was searching for that place in surprise and anxiety when suddenly her hand hit a bookshelf. A book slid from its place, and a secret door to the basement opened on the floor level, the same door she had entered through the first time. Michelle entered, amazed. She had just gone down the stairs when she felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Frank Elm standing there. He was dressed in a casual tracksuit, wearing a mysterious smile. Michelle was drenched in sweat upon seeing him. "It's good you came here," Frank said, stepping closer to her with a smile. "Now you will see with your own eyes what is going to happen." Saying this, he grabbed Michelle's arm firmly and started dragging her inside with him. "Leave me! Please, I don't want to go in there." Michelle tried to free her arm, pleading. Her voice trembled with fear. "I know what you do. Please let me go." "You know what I do?" The smile on Frank's face deepened. "Very soon, you will also know what happens to those who don't listen to me." Michelle tried every possible way to free her arm, but Frank dragged her inside. There, tied up, were the 2 boys who had passed rude remarks at Michelle in the hotel. Seeing them, Michelle broke into a cold sweat. Frank shoved Michelle into a corner and then started beating the boys brutally. Michelle began to cry out of fear and terror, squeezing her eyes shut tightly. "Open your eyes, Michelle, or I will punish them even worse," Frank said sternly. Michelle, in a trembling voice, tried to stop him. "Frank, please don't, this is wrong. Let them go." But seeing Frank's terrifying rage, she couldn't bear it anymore and fainted. Frank left the boys semi-unconscious, dusted off his hands, and walked toward Michelle. "Fragile little thing," he laughed sarcastically. Lifting Michelle in his arms, he walked out of the basement. But this time, instead of her guest room, he took her to his own bedroom. He adjusted the blanket over Michelle and, sitting on the couch opposite the bed, began watching her with intense eyes. When Michelle opened her eyes, her head was throbbing again. She lifted her gaze to see Frank sitting in front of her. He was staring at her fixedly, his fist resting against his lips. Frank's deep, unblinking gaze terrified her. At first, she couldn't understand where she was. When she realized she was in an unfamiliar room, panic set in. Seeing a large portrait of Frank on the wall, her heartbeat accelerated. She immediately scrambled off the bed and tried to run out. Her only goal was to escape this room and Frank's gaze. But when she tried the door, it was locked. Michelle leaned her back against the door in despair, clenching her trembling hands into fists. Tears began to flow rapidly. Watching all this, Frank stood up and slowly started walking toward her. "Trying to run is useless," Frank's cold voice echoed. "Escaping from here is not as easy as you think." Michelle looked at him, fear and helplessness evident in her eyes. Where am I? This is your room." "Well, this is my room," Frank said, stopping close to her. "You are safe here." "Safe?" There was bitterness in Michelle's tone. "First you took me to a torture chamber, and now, I don't know what is going on in your mind." A mysterious smile appeared on Frank's lips. "You don't need to know what is going on in my mind." "Why have you brought me here?" Michelle asked. "And why did you show me all that? Is this your job? Torturing people?" Frank took a deep breath. "Those people deserved it. They harassed you. Anyone who looks at my property with dirty eyes meets a fate worse than that." Michelle was stunned. "Your property? Since when did I become your property? I am Adam's sister. For now, as long as you are in this house, you are my responsibility." Frank stared at her. "No one touches my responsibilities." "Your presence gave me a good excuse to teach those punks a lesson," Michelle said through her tears. "I know you are a cruel man. I don't want to stay here. I want to go to Adam." "You will go, but only when I wish," Frank said sternly. "As long as you are here, you will do as I say. Now go change your clothes and come downstairs. We need to talk." Frank's tone was final. Michelle didn't have the courage to argue. She lowered her head and quietly left the room. Michelle ran to her guest room and, sobbing, dialed Adam with trembling hands. But Jessica picked up the phone. As soon as she answered, she said, "Michelle, we are busy. We will call you when we're free," and disconnected. Michelle began to cry uncontrollably. She felt utterly helpless. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. The housekeeper stood there holding a beautiful dress. "Ma'am, get ready quickly and come downstairs. Sir is waiting for you." Michelle took the clothes, but she had no intention of getting ready. After a while, the housekeeper knocked again. When Michelle didn't open the door, she heard the housekeeper's scared voice. "Sir says if you don't come down in 5 minutes, he will come up to get you himself. And that won't be pleasant." At this threat, Michelle was terrified. She had seen Frank's anger. She got up quickly and hurriedly changed into the dress. It was an elegant white gown with beautiful embroidery. In her heart, she prayed to God that this nightmare would end soon. When Michelle walked down the stairs, Frank smiled slightly upon seeing her. There was a strange mystery in that smile that increased the fear in her heart. He took Michelle's hand and led her toward the drawing room. As soon as she stepped inside, she felt the floor drop out from under her. An officiant, a cleric, and several witnesses were sitting there with serious expressions. Michelle felt as if she had been electrocuted. She jerked back and asked Frank in a stumbling voice, What is all this?" Frank's face became serious. "Our wedding." "Wedding?" A scream escaped Michelle's throat. "No, this cannot happen. I cannot marry you." She started backing away rapidly, tears in her eyes and terror on her face. "Please, Frank, what are you doing? I won't marry you." She started pleading. "I don't know you. This is wrong. What will Adam think if he finds out?" Frank grabbed her arm firmly. His grip was so tight that Michelle groaned in pain. "Your opinion has no meaning here. What I say goes." His tone was so cold and decisive that Michelle felt she was talking to a statue of ice. "I don't love you." "How can you force me?" Michelle screamed. A flood of tears flowed down her cheeks. "This is coercion. This is illegal." "Talking about love?" A sarcastic smile appeared on Frank's lips. "Love has no value in this world. Power is everything. And now you have realized my power." He signaled the officiant. "Sir, begin the ceremony." Michelle looked at the officiant, then at the witnesses. Everyone wore the same stony expression. She looked around for help, but saw no ray of hope. "No, I do not accept. I cannot marry you." She made a last attempt. "You will accept, Michelle. You have to." Frank held her hand, crushing it in his fingers. There was such intensity in his eyes that Michelle's heart began to sink. "If I say you are mine, no one can take you away from me." The officiant began the vows. Frank held Michelle's hand firmly. Her body trembled. Her soul screamed in silence. She closed her eyes, and in a state of utter helplessness, surrendered. "I do." Her voice was lifeless, but Frank squeezed her hand, forcing her to complete the vows. Michelle was tied against her will to Frank Elm in a relationship that felt like a prison. After the ceremony, the officiant and the witnesses left. Only Frank and Michelle remained. Frank gently kissed her forehead and, looking at her with softer eyes, said, "It was necessary to do this today. Adam and Jessica return tomorrow." There was a strange softness in his tone. "Jessica doesn't like you. She would have interfered and I couldn't ignore her. She is my only sister and I love her very much." Frank said this deliberately to make a point. Michelle stared at him with hate-filled eyes. "You will not tell your brother that this marriage was forced," Frank said, looking at her. "If you tell him, it will hurt my sister." He added, "I don't want to have to do something bad to Adam and leave you mourning him for the rest of your life." Frank seemed impossibly cruel. Michelle looked at him with wounded eyes, then lowered her gaze. Frank wiped her tears with his thumb and caressed her cheek. "Don't worry. I will handle everything. I will deal with Adam too. Just go along with what I say." Michelle jerked his hand away and ran from the room. Frank looked at his hand for a moment, took a deep breath, and walked out. Michelle locked herself in her room. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Every minute felt like a century. Eventually, the housekeeper knocked. "Ma'am, your brother has arrived." Hearing this, Michelle felt a wave of relief mixed with dread. She went downstairs with a trembling heart. Voices drifted up from the living room. Jessica was shouting at Frank, "How could you marry Michelle without asking me?" Adam was also staring at Frank with angry eyes. "Calm down, both of you," Frank explained coolly. "If you react like this, you'll scare Michelle. She's already nervous." "He had no shame doing the deed, but now he worries she's scared?" Jessica said sarcastically. "What's done is done," Frank said, trying to end the matter. "We fell in love, so we got married." At Frank's lie, Michelle squeezed her eyes shut. Involuntarily, the words escaped her lips. "I hate you, Frank." Michelle reached the bottom of the stairs. Her eyes were fixed on Adam. Upon seeing her, Adam stood up. "If you fell in love and wanted to marry Frank, you should have trusted me. You could have told me. By making such a big decision yourself. You've really hurt me." Hearing this, Michelle hugged Adam and cried, sobbing, "Adam, I want to go home with you." "Please." Frank pursed his lips. Jessica moved toward Michelle in anger, but Adam stopped her. He stroked Michelle's hair. Frank, barely tolerating the talk of her leaving, said, "Okay, take Michelle with you for now. Next week, I will come to officially take her home." Saying this, Frank left. Jessica glared at Adam and Michelle. The following week arrived, and fear grew in Michelle's heart. She knew Frank would come to take her. She pleaded with Adam, "Adam, I don't want to move in with him right now." Adam looked at her with concern. "What is the problem, Michelle? You are married now. Frank wants to take you home, and I can't refuse him." There was helplessness in his tone. Michelle started crying. She folded her hands in front of Adam. "Please, Adam, I'm not ready yet. I need more time. I don't want to leave here." Her voice trembled. Seeing her condition, Adam fell silent. That evening, Frank came to Adam's house. He looked serious. Adam said, "Frank, Michelle isn't ready to move in yet. She needs some time." Hearing this, Frank's face turned red with anger. He stared at Adam, then started walking quickly toward Michelle's room to confront her himself. But Jessica stopped him. "Frank, where are you going?" Jessica said seriously. "You will not talk to Michelle right now." Frank looked at Jessica with rage. "Jessica, I have to talk to her. How long will she pull these childish stunts?" "Childish stunts?" Jessica retorted. "You should have thought about her temperament before marrying her. If you could marry her without listening to her, then her moving in can certainly be delayed by listening to her." Frank's voice boomed. "This is our personal matter. Don't interfere." "Personal matter?" Jessica laughed sarcastically. "You remember, right? You told me that I am the most important person to you. And because of that, I accepted every decision you made. But this decision was wrong." "Frank, Jessica is right," Adam intervened. "Michelle isn't ready. She needs time. She's young. She'll understand eventually." Frank looked at Adam with a cold glint in his eyes. He turned and walked out quickly. Jessica stomped her foot in anger, and Adam worriedly thought about his sister's future. The next day, Jessica arrived at Frank's office. Furious, she saw Frank busy with files. "Frank, what have you done?" she demanded. Frank looked up displeased. "What now? What are you doing here?" "What now?" Jessica repeated sarcastically. "How can you love a loose girl like her? She trapped you in her web, and you fell for it." "Oh, she just slipped right in when she saw your wealth." Frank was confused. Michelle hadn't trapped him, he had forced her. He furrowed his brow. "What nonsense are you talking about?" "Say it clearly." "What should I say?" Jessica laughed bitterly. "If you had asked me before the wedding, maybe you would have been saved." Frank's face turned red. "Saved from whom?" "From that girl," Jessica said with contempt. "Because she was already in love with another man." Hearing this, Frank clenched his jaw. Intense anger filled his eyes. He couldn't believe it. Jessica saw his reaction and smiled sarcastically. "Now, there is no use thinking about it. You are married." She paused, then added, "But right now, Michelle isn't agreeing to move in with you. So I guess things will happen just as she wishes." Saying this, Jessica left, indifferent to Frank's rage. She had said it all deliberately. As soon as she left, Frank swept everything off his desk in a fury. A storm raged inside him. Michelle's helplessness and fear vanished from his mind. In its place was one question: love for someone else? Jessica's words set a fire inside Frank. The mention of another man pricked his heart like a thorn. In a rage, he summoned Adam to his office. When Adam arrived, Frank looked murderous. "Adam, I need to discuss something important." Frank gestured for him to sit. Adam sat anxiously. "Yes, Frank. What is the problem?" "The problem is that Michelle is creating drama," Frank said bluntly. "You talk to her. Get her to agree to move in." Adam was surprised. "But Frank, she isn't ready." "She married me of her own free will," Frank lied coldly. "So why is she creating drama about moving in now?" Adam tried to explain. "Frank, she's young. She's naive. Give her time." Frank cut him off. "I don't like this drama. If she doesn't agree to come home this very week, then she never comes home at all." Adam was stunned. "Frank, what are you saying?" "You heard me." Frank punched the table. "I only know that I married her, and she has to accept this relationship. Convince her today. Otherwise what?" Adam asked, gathering courage. "Otherwise, this relationship ends right here. And the consequences will be worse than you can imagine," Frank said coldly. "I want Michelle to come to my house happily. But if she has a problem with me, there is no need for this charade." Adam bowed his head, realizing he had no choice. "I will talk to her, Frank. I will try my best." Frank nodded and returned to his files, dismissing him. Adam left in despair. Adam went home and straight to Michelle's room. She was sitting alone, looking terrified. "Michelle, you have to listen to Frank," Adam said gently. "You have to go with him next week." Michelle looked up, tears swimming in her eyes. "I won't go. Adam, you know that." "But you married him, Michelle." Adam's tone sharpened. "Now you have to fulfill this commitment. Look, if you don't agree, Frank will divorce you." Adam threatened her as a last resort. Hearing this, Michelle looked at Adam. A strange gleam appeared in her eyes. "Okay, I want a divorce. Tell him to give me a divorce." There was no fear in her tone, only a desire for freedom. "You want a divorce?" Adam roared. He slapped his sister hard across the face. "You think marriage is a joke? This is no game. I gave my word to Frank." "You are moving in with him this week." Michelle froze. The mark of Adam's hand burned on her cheek. Tears flowed, but this time not out of fear, but out of shock and betrayal. The day of her departure arrived. Michelle sat in her room, dressed for the move. Her eyes were swollen, and a deathly gloom covered her face. This was not a day of joy, but the day of her life's greatest tragedy. After a brief farewell, Michelle left with Frank. There was no hope in her heart, just the feeling of being a puppet transferred from one owner to another. When they arrived, Michelle sat terrified in Frank's bedroom. The room was decorated, but it meant nothing to her. Frank sat on the bed opposite her and spoke without looking at her. "You never told me that you loved someone else," Frank said suddenly, his tone devoid of emotion, cold as ice. Michelle was startled. Love? She didn't even have a male friend, let alone a lover. "Did you think you could hide this from me?" Frank's tone dropped lower. "What did you think? That I am such a fool I would believe your fake innocence? That I would go mad with love for you?" Anger began to bleed into his voice. "Girls like you are not worthy of love." Michelle clenched her fist. She didn't want to offer any explanation. She lifted her head and looked at him, helplessness and sorrow visible in her eyes. She started to speak, but Frank stopped her. "Silence! I don't want to hear any lies from you," Frank roared in anger. "A woman obsessed with her own cousin. What else could I expect from her?" He pointed to the door. "Get out of my room. I cannot tolerate a woman with no morals in my sight for even a moment." It felt as if someone had slapped Michelle across the face. Her eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't say a word. Humiliated and ashamed, she bowed her head. She stood up quietly and walked out with trembling steps, while Frank watched her with seething anger. Surprisingly, Michelle felt a strange sense of relief at Frank's cold shoulder. She had expected him to be cruel, to keep her in captivity, but instead he completely ignored her. He wouldn't look at her or talk to her. Acting as if she didn't exist in the house, Michelle found this situation to be a blessing. She began to feel a sense of peace, as if she were free to live life on her own terms, at least. She was safe from Frank's gaze. She started spending her days reading books, walking in the garden, and making light conversation with the staff. But Frank couldn't tolerate this. Michelle's happiness pricked him like a thorn. He had never imagined that the girl he had claimed would be happy with his neglect. This reality bruised his male ego badly. One day, while Michelle was sitting in the garden reading a book peacefully, the housekeeper came and told her that Frank was calling her to his room. Michelle's heart skipped a beat. She felt her time of peace was about to end. Taking slow, heavy steps, she moved toward Frank's room. As soon as she entered, Frank stalked toward her in anger. There was an intense, dangerous glint in his eyes that terrified her. "You are very happy, aren't you?" Frank said, staring at her furiously. "Or you are enjoying my silence a little too much." Michelle said nothing, just lowered her gaze. "Do you think I will allow you this freedom any longer?" Frank grabbed her arm. "What did you think? That you could just live freely after coming into my life?" There was such hardness in his tone that a shiver ran down her spine. "You are my wife, Michelle. And tonight, I will claim my rights so that you never forget to whom you belong, even in my absence." Michelle looked at him with terror. A scream rose in her throat, but Frank didn't give her a chance to speak. He forced himself on her, ignoring her silent pleas. That night was the most terrifying and painful night of Michelle's life. Days began to pass quickly. Michelle once again started living in Frank's room, constantly on edge. While she remained terrified of Frank, she was surprised to see his gentleness with the staff. Slowly, the sheer terror began to fade. Or perhaps she was just becoming accustomed to his volatile nature. When Adam and Jessica visited, Adam would treat her with love, but Jessica would always say something to spoil Frank's mood. Michelle couldn't understand why Jessica hated her so much. One day, Michelle was standing sadly near the bedroom window when Frank entered. "Lost in thought. Seems like you're missing someone," Frank said in a deeply sarcastic tone. "I was missing you," Michelle replied softly. Frank was taken aback. It was the first time Michelle had ever said something like that. He looked at her in confusion. "What did you say? Say it again," Frank said. Stepping closer. "Just that. I was missing you." Her eyes remained lowered. No matter how strong she tried to be, the fear of Frank still sat heavy in her heart. "Missing me? Do you take me for a fool? Do you think you can mock me?" Suddenly, Frank roared in anger, causing Michelle to stumble back in fear. You married me of your own will. Then why do you treat me so badly?" she cried out, her voice rising. "It's as if I have been forced upon you. What is my fault?" Frank looked at her, raising an eyebrow. "Your fault. Your fault is that your intentions are corrupt. I married you because I thought you were innocent." "But you—" He stopped mid-sentence, about to storm out in anger. Michelle gathered her courage and stood in front of him, blocking his path. "But I what? Complete the sentence." Frank was amazed at her daring. "Move out of my way. Don't make me angry." He spoke through clenched teeth, but she stood her ground. "You love looking in the mirror? Then listen. You are a girl of loose character who had an affair with her cousin. You are married to me, but he resides in your heart." With a sarcastic smile, he shoved Michelle out of the way and turned to leave. Michelle's voice froze him in his tracks. "Jessica told you all this rubbish, didn't she?" This time, Michelle smiled sarcastically. She knew only Jessica could spew this poison. "Don't you dare speak my sister's name with your tongue," he warned, pointing a finger at her. "I shouldn't take your sister's name." "Yet you forcibly marry someone else's sister. You accuse her? You mistreat her? Everything is permissible for you, isn't it?" Frank barely controlled his temper, but Michelle's words hit hard. They were true. "Listen to me, and tell your sister this too. To have a romance with a cousin, one needs to have an uncle or an aunt. I don't have any uncles. I don't have any cousins." Saying this, she walked out of the room. Leaving, Frank turned to stone. Frank stood there petrified. It took a moment for the reality to sink in. She has no cousins. He felt an intense wave of rage directed at Jessica, rubbing his hand over his face. He went after Michelle, who had locked herself in the guest room. "Michelle, open the door," he said gently, leaning against the wood. But Michelle gave no answer. Her sobbing from inside was clearly audible. "Okay, fine. You're right. I am wrong. I apologize. Please open the door." Inside, Michelle froze. She had heard many times from Adam and Jessica that Frank never admitted his mistakes, let alone apologized. She opened the door and stared at Frank with anger in her tear-filled eyes. It was the first time she stood before him without fear. As her father used to say, a man only bows before the woman he cannot bear to see in pain. Under her intense gaze, Frank held up his hands in a gesture of surrender and apology. At this slightly childish act from such a terrifying man, Michelle began to laugh involuntarily. Seeing her laugh, Frank smiled and pulled her into a hug. 2 days later, Jessica and Adam arrived at Frank's house. They were amazed to see the entire place decorated with red and white flowers. It looked as if every flower in the world had been arranged there. When Jessica entered, Frank was pacing while talking on the phone. Seeing them, he cut the call and walked over. "What is all this, Frank?" Jessica asked in surprise. "It's your little sister-in-law's birthday today." "Just preparing a surprise." At Frank's words, Adam smiled broadly, while the colour drained from Jessica's face. Frank saw it, but completely ignored her reaction. "Have you lost your mind, Frank?" Jessica snapped. Unable to tolerate it, Adam looked at her with displeasure. "Watch your tone, Jessica," Frank said, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Your head is not in the right place. I have forgiven a very grave mistake of yours." "But if I told Adam what you did, he wouldn't forgive you." He whispered the last part through gritted teeth near her ear. Jessica was stunned, looking at him in disbelief. "So you are threatening me?" "Frank, for this worthless girl, you are threatening the sister who stood by you through everything!" Jessica screamed. Michelle came running down the stairs in panic upon hearing the noise. "You're here! What black magic have you used on my brother?" Jessica roared, lunging toward Michelle. Adam pulled her back angrily, but Jessica's rage was out of control. "Adam! Take her and leave! I don't want my relationship with her to be ruined forever." Frank said seriously, "Oh, wow! For this girl, you will throw me out of the house? Frank, seriously, even knowing the reality of this girl, that she—" "Speak thoughtfully, Jessica," Frank warned, raising a finger. "She is not just your sister-in-law. She is Frank Elm's wife, his favourite, beloved wife." Hearing Frank defend her honour like this, Michelle looked at him with misty eyes. There was a time when Frank prioritised Jessica over everything. But today, he was clarifying Michelle's status in front of her. Adam smiled, calm and satisfied. Jessica, however, had tears of rage in her eyes. "You are a cheap girl," Jessica spat at Michelle. "You have a habit of trapping boys with your fake innocence." "How did you trap my brother? Tell the truth. He isn't one to fall for beauty. Did you sleep with him to trap him?" Jessica's words were cut short when Frank slapped her hard across the face. Adam, who had stepped forward to slap her himself, froze. "I married her by force," Frank shouted, silencing the room. "She called Adam that day to stop the wedding, didn't she? Jessica, you didn't let her talk to Adam. Michelle was never willing. I blackmailed her." "She didn't trap me. She didn't weave a web of love. In fact, from start to finish, she has been in agony because of me. And now, when she is finally trying to be happy, staying with me even after all my cruelty." "You can't tolerate it? What do you want? Should I leave her? If you say so, I will leave her, but remember, I cannot live without her." Frank, breathing heavily, grabbed the crying Michelle's hand and led her into the room. Jessica and Adam stood there, shocked by the revelation. Adam finally understood why Michelle had refused to move in with Frank, and why she had begged for help. He remembered slapping her and felt like cutting off his own hand in regret. He grabbed Jessica and dragged her home. "The whole way," Jessica sobbed. Even after arriving home, silence hung between them. "Your sister snatched my brother from me," Jessica cried. "The brother who used to dance to my tune." Now he dances to hers. Adam took a deep breath. But first, you snatched Michelle's brother from her in the exact same way. Jessica, do I not do everything you ask? Am I not enough for you? At Adam's words, Jessica looked at him silently, then hid her face in her hands. Adam walked over, hugged her, and patted her back gently. Everyone has their own place, Jessica. Learn to accept it. Every couple has the right to live their own life. Jessica didn't answer. She just clung to Adam's chest and cried. It was midnight. Frank led Michelle to the garden with a velvet blindfold over her eyes. Today, he had validated her with every action and every word. When he removed the blindfold, Michelle was stunned by the breathtaking decorations. Her eyes went wide. "This is all so beautiful," she said, her eyes sparkling. "But less beautiful than you," Frank whispered in her ear, making her blush. "Happy birthday, Michelle!" Hearing Jessica and Adam's voices, Frank and Michelle turned around, startled. "We know this is your private moment," Jessica said gently, stepping forward. "But we couldn't wait to apologize. We're only here for a minute." She walked over and hugged Michelle tightly. Frank watched his sister with a relieved smile. Adam and Jessica apologized profusely, and Michelle, having a big heart, forgave them. Frank also apologized to Jessica for the slap. In everyone's presence, Michelle cut the cake. After the celebration, Jessica and Adam left. "Why don't you just jump in the swimming pool?" Frank said mischievously. Michelle glared at him playfully. "You know I don't know how to swim," she said, making a face. "I am here. I won't let you drown. Anywhere, anytime." At Frank's words, Michelle looked deep into his eyes. Suddenly, Frank grabbed her by the waist and fell backward into the pool, pulling her in with him. Michelle's screams and laughter echoed through the night.